Blood dripped onto the perfectly manicured grass of the Hampton estate, each drop disappearing into the emerald green, like secrets being swallowed by the earth. Lorenzo Catalano pressed his hand against the gunshot wound in his side, feeling the warm blood seep between his fingers. He'd been shot twice in the past 24 hours. The first bullet had grazed his shoulder during the ambush at the Brooklyn warehouse. The second, just an hour ago, had found its mark when he'd stopped at a gas station in Queens, thinking he was far enough away to be safe. He'd been wrong. In the rearview mirror of the stolen pickup truck, he could see them, 3 black SUVs, maybe 4 blocks back. The Torino family, the ones who'd betrayed him, who'd killed his brother and seized control of the Catalano territory in a single bloody night. Lorenzo had been the head of the Catalano crime family for 12 years. They controlled the heroin trade coming through the port of New York, the gambling operations in Manhattan, and had legitimate businesses stretching from construction to waste management. The Catalano name meant power in Sicily and respect in New York, or it had until 48 hours ago. His second-in-command, Paolo Torino, had been planning the coup for over a year. Lorenzo's brother Matteo had discovered the plot, had tried to warn him, and had died, with a bullet in his head before he could speak the traitor's name. By the time Lorenzo figured out who'd killed his brother, Paolo had already turned most of the family soldiers against him. The story was simple and believable. Lorenzo had been skimming money, was planning to testify against the family to the FBI, had killed Matteo when he tried to stop him. All lies, but lies wrapped in enough truth to be convincing. Now Lorenzo was running, not just from Paolo's soldiers, but from the FBI who wanted him for crimes he actually had committed, from rival families who saw his weakness as opportunity, from his own organization that wanted him dead. The Hamptons had been a desperate gamble. His grandmother had worked as a cook in one of these estates back in the 1950s. She used to tell him stories about the wealthy families, their huge properties, their invisible servants. Lorenzo figured if he could find work on one of these estates, he could hide in plain sight. No one looks at the gardener, no one remembers the help. He'd stolen the pickup truck from a landscaping company in Riverhead, along with work clothes and equipment, the gunshot wounds he'd wrapped in duct tape, and stolen gauze from a CVS pharmacy. The pain was constant, burning, threatening to pull him under with every breath. But Lorenzo Catalano hadn't survived 37 years. In the mafia, by being weak, he could handle pain. What he couldn't handle was dying in some gutter, forgotten and alone. The estate he chose was called Windmere, a 12-acre property owned by Marcus and Diane Whitmore. Marcus was some kind of hedge fund manager who spent most of his time in the city. Diane was a socialite who hosted charity events and sat on museum boards. They had 3 full-time staff, a housekeeper, a cook, and a gardener, who'd apparently quit 2 weeks ago after a disagreement about wages. Lorenzo had learned all this from the housekeeper at the neighboring estate, an older Filipino woman who'd been happy to gossip with the new landscaper who'd come to check on the property next door. The Whitmores were in Europe for the summer. They wouldn't be back until September, which was 3 months away. The skeleton staff was maintaining the property in their absence. It was perfect. Lorenzo parked the truck at the service entrance and grabbed the landscaping tools. His vision swam from blood loss, but he forced himself to walk steady, to look confident. He knocked on the kitchen door and waited. The woman who opened it was in her early 30s. Black, with natural hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a simple grey dress with a white apron, the standard uniform of domestic help in these wealthy homes. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice carrying a southern accent that spoke of somewhere far from New York. "I'm here about the gardener position," Lorenzo said, making his own accent more working-class Italian, the kind that belonged to a laborer, not a boss. "The agency sent me said you were short-staffed." The woman frowned. "We didn't call any agency. Maybe Mrs. Whitmore arranged it before she left. I got the address and everything." Lorenzo pulled out a forged work order he'd created at a FedEx print shop. "Says here you need someone to maintain the grounds through September." She studied the paper, clearly uncertain. Lorenzo could see her weighing the decision. The grounds did need work. He could see overgrown hedges and uncut grass from where he stood, but taking on a new employee without the owner's direct approval was risky. "What's your name?" she asked finally. "Enzo," Lorenzo said, using the shortened version of his middle name. "Enzo Romano." "I'm Grace," she said. "Grace Mitchell. I'm the head housekeeper here." She looked past him at the truck, the equipment. "You have references?" "Yes, ma'am. All in order. I can start today if you need me. Been doing landscaping for 15 years. I know these properties, know what they need." Grace was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "The grass does need cutting, and those rose bushes are getting out." "Dove control all right, Mr. Romano, you can start. But I'm calling Mrs. Whitmore tomorrow to confirm, so if you're lying..." "Not lying, ma'am, just looking for honest work." She showed him to the gardener's cottage, a small building near the property's edge that the previous groundskeeper had used. It was simple but clean. One room with a bed, a bathroom, a small kitchenette. "You'll work 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday," Grace explained. "Sundays. Off wages are $700 a week, paid in cash every Friday. Meals are provided in the main kitchen at noon. Any questions?" "No, Mum, thank you for the opportunity." After she left, Lorenzo collapsed on the bed, his vision tunneling. The gunshot wound in his side was bleeding again. He pulled off his shirt and examined the damage. The bullet had gone through, which was good, but the wound was angry and red, clearly infected. He had antibiotics in the stolen first aid kit, but he needed proper medical attention. He needed rest. He needed to not be running for his life. For now, this would have to do. Lorenzo spent the first 3 days in a fog of pain and fever. He forced himself to work during daylight hours, cutting grass, trimming hedges, doing the bare minimum to appear functional, but the moment the sun set, he'd stumble back to the cottage and collapse. The infection was getting worse. He knew the signs: the spreading redness, the fever that wouldn't break, the way the wound oozed yellow fluid that smelled of rot without proper treatment. He'd be dead within a week. Maybe that was fitting. Lorenzo Catalano, feared boss of the Catalano family, dying alone in a gardener's cottage, forgotten by everyone. It was on the 4th night, when the fever had him hallucinating, that Grace found him. He didn't hear her knock, didn't hear the door open. The first thing he registered was her voice, sharp with alarm. "Jesus Christ, what happened to you?" Lorenzo tried to sit up, tried to play it off as nothing, but his body wouldn't cooperate. "I'm fine, just a little under the weather." "You're not under the weather, you're dying. That wound is badly infected." She moved closer, and Lorenzo could smell lavender, could sense her presence like a lifeline in the darkness. "How did this happen?" "Accident, few days ago. I've been treating it." "Well, you've been doing a terrible job." She pulled out her phone. "No." Lorenzo reached out, grabbing her wrist. "Please, no hospitals, no police. I'll be fine." Grace stared at him, and in her eyes, Lorenzo saw a calculation happening. She was smart enough to know that people who avoided hospitals and police were usually running from something. "Let go of my wrist," she said quietly. Lorenzo released her immediately. "I'm sorry, I'm not going to hurt you. I can't go to a hospital, please." "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "Yes, legal trouble, the worst kind." She should have called the police right then. Any reasonable person would have. But instead, Grace sat down on the edge of the bed and really looked at him. "My brother," she said finally, "got mixed up with the wrong people back in Georgia. Drugs, gangs, all of it. He did things he wasn't proud of, made mistakes that followed him everywhere. One day he showed up at my door bleeding from a knife wound, begging me not to call anyone because if the gang found out he'd talked to the police, they'd kill our mama." She was quiet for a moment, lost in memory. "I patched him up that night, kept him hidden for a week. Eventually, he got himself to a rehab program, got clean, started over. He's been sober for 8 years now, has 2 kids, works as a mechanic. But if I'd called the police that night, if I'd turned him away, he'd be dead." Grace looked at Lorenzo with those steady, compassionate eyes. "I don't know what you did. I don't know what you're running from. But I can see you're hurt and I can see you're scared and I can see you need help. So I'm going to help you. Not because I approve of whatever you did, but because everyone deserves a chance to survive." "Why? Would you risk yourself for a stranger?" "Because I believe in second chances, and because the man upstairs put you in my path for a reason. Now, are you going to let me help you, or are you going to die of stubbornness?" Over the next week, Grace saved Lorenzo's life. She cleaned his wounds with supplies she brought from the main house. She gave him antibiotics that she said were left over from a prescription she'd never finished. She brought him food, made him drink water even when he felt too sick to swallow, and sat with him through the worst of the fever dreams. "You talk in your sleep," she said one morning, changing his bandages. "You kept saying Matteo." "Who's Matteo?" "My brother," Lorenzo said quietly. "He died." "I'm sorry." "Me too." She didn't ask how his brother died, didn't push for details. She just did the work of keeping him alive, day after day, with a quiet competence that reminded Lorenzo of his grandmother. As Lorenzo's strength returned, he started to notice details about Grace that he'd missed in his fever haze, the way she moved with economical efficiency, never wasting motion, the calluses on her hands that spoke of years of hard work, the worn Bible she kept in her apron pocket, its pages soft from being read over and over. "How long have you been working here?" he asked one evening as she checked his wounds. 3 years. "It's a good job. Mrs. Whitmore can be demanding, but she pays fair and on time. That's more than a lot of people in my position can say." "You're from the South originally?" "Georgia, small town called Valdosta. Came to New York 5 years ago, looking for better opportunities, ended up in the Hamptons working for rich folks." She smiled without humor. "Not exactly what I dreamed about when I was young." "What did you dream about?" Grace was quiet for a moment, her hands still on his bandages. I wanted to be a teacher. Specifically, I wanted to teach history at the high school where I graduated. Wanted to show kids like me that there's more to the world than what they can see from their small town. What happened? Life happened. My mama got sick with Alzheimer's. The medical bills ate everything. I dropped out of college to take care of her and work enough jobs to pay for her care. By the time she passed, I was 28 years old with half a degree and a mountain of debt. Teaching wasn't an option anymore, so I do this instead. There was no bitterness in her voice, just acceptance of the hand life had dealt her. I'm sorry, Lorenzo said. For what? That life didn't work out the way you deserved. Grace looked at him with surprise. That's a kind thing to say. It's a true thing. Something shifted between them in that moment. Recognition of shared loss, of dreams deferred, of the gap between who we wanted to be and whose circumstances made us. By the end of the second week, Lorenzo was strong enough to work again. He fell into a routine, working the grounds during the day, eating lunch in the main kitchen where Grace served meals with quiet efficiency, then spending evenings in the cottage, always aware of the fragile peace he'd found. The work was hard, his body used to. Sitting in restaurants and negotiating deals, protested the physical labor. His hands, which had once worn custom-made leather gloves, developed blisters that turned to calluses. His back, which had once reclined in luxury cars, ached from hours of bending and lifting. But there was something almost meditative about it, the simple honesty of the work. You planted something, you tended it, and it grew, or it didn't. There were no lies, no betrayals, no hidden agendas, just dirt and seeds and the patient work of cultivation. Grace would sometimes bring him iced tea in the afternoons, and they'd talk while he took a break from the heat. You're different from the last gardener, she observed one day. How so? You actually care about the plants. He just came in, did the minimum, collected his check, but you're out here studying them, learning what each one needs. Why? Lorenzo looked at the rose bushes he'd been tending, their blooms just starting to open. My grandmother had a garden in Sicily, not big, just a small plot behind her house, but she knew every plant, talked to them like they were her children. She used to say that a garden teaches you patience and humility, that you can't force things to grow. You can only create the conditions for growth and then get out of the way. She sounds like a wise woman. She also used to say that the richest man isn't the one with the most money, but the one who can create beauty where there was none before. Lorenzo gestured to the rose bushes. These were dying when I got here. Now they're blooming. That's worth more than any amount of money. Grace studied him with those penetrating eyes. You're not just some landscaper, are you, Enzo? You talk like someone who's had education, opportunities. Maybe I was once. Now I'm just a man, trying to survive. What are you running from? Lorenzo met her gaze. The past, my mistakes, the consequences of choices I can't undo. Will they ever stop looking for you? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe one day they'll find me, and this will all end. And until then I tend the garden. If you're invested in Lorenzo and Grace's story, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button. It helps these stories reach more people who might need to hear them, and trust me, what's about to happen will change everything. It was on a Tuesday morning in late July when everything changed. Lorenzo was working on the far end of the property, repairing a section of fence that had rotted, when he saw them. Two men in suits far too formal for the Hamptons in summer, walking up the main driveway with the confident stride of people who believed they owned the world. His blood went cold, even. From a distance he recognized the walk, the posture. Mafia, maybe not Torino's people specifically, but definitely connected. Lorenzo ducked behind the fence line and watched. The men knocked on the main door. Grace answered, spoke with them briefly, then shook her head. They showed her something, probably a photo, probably his photo. She shook her head again. The men left, but Lorenzo knew they'd be back. Somehow, they'd tracked him to the Hamptons. Maybe they'd found the stolen truck. Maybe someone had recognized him at the hardware store where he'd bought supplies. It didn't matter how. What mattered was they were close. He had to leave. Tonight. Disappear again before they came back with more men, before they hurt Grace or the other staff in their search for him. Lorenzo spent the rest of the day working mechanically, his mind racing through options. He had maybe $5,000 in cash. Hidden in the cottage, it wouldn't last long, but it was enough to get somewhere far from New York, maybe Canada, maybe Mexico, somewhere he could disappear for real. That evening, Grace knocked on his cottage door. Those men who came today, she said without preamble. They were looking for someone named Lorenzo Catalano. They showed me a photo. It looked like you, except you had shorter hair and wore expensive clothes. Lorenzo said nothing. There was no point in lying anymore. They said he's the head of a crime family, that he's wanted for murder, racketeering, drug trafficking. They said there's a reward for information leading to his arrest. How much? Lorenzo asked quietly. $50,000. 50,000. That would change Grace's life, pay off her debts, let her go back to school, give her the future she'd sacrificed for her mother. I'm sorry, Lorenzo said. I never meant to put you in danger. I'll leave tonight. Is it true? Are you a mafia boss? Was past tense. I'm not that person anymore. But you were. You did those things they said. Some of them, yes, not the murders they're accusing me of. My second in command killed my brother and framed me. But the rest, the drugs, the illegal businesses, the violence, yes, I did those things. I built an empire on pain and suffering, and I told myself it was tradition, it was business, it was just the way things were. And now I see it for what it was, evil disguised as power, cowardice dressed up as strength. Grace sat down on the small porch outside his cottage. They said they'd come back tomorrow, that they're watching all the properties in this area. Which is why I need to leave tonight, Grace. I can't thank you enough for what you did. You saved my life. You showed me kindness I didn't deserve, but I can't stay here and put you at risk. Where will you go? I don't know. Far from here, far from anyone who knew me. They'll find you eventually. Men like that always do. Maybe, but at least you'll be safe. Grace was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the garden Lorenzo had restored over the past few weeks. The roses were blooming now, deep red and white, their perfume filling the evening air. My brother, she said finally, the one I told you about. When he showed up bleeding at my door, I had a choice. I could have turned him away, protected myself, collected whatever reward his gang might have offered for information, or I could help him, knowing that choice might put me in danger. She turned to look at Lorenzo. I chose to help him, and because of that choice, he's alive today. He has a family. He has a future. He became someone better than the person who knocked on my door that night. Grace, this is different. Your brother made mistakes, but he wasn't a crime boss. I've hurt people. I've destroyed lives. I don't deserve it. Stop, she interrupted. Stop telling me what you deserve. I'm not asking about what you deserve. I'm asking about what you want to become. I want to be better. I want to be the kind of man who creates beauty instead of destroying it. But wanting it doesn't change what I am. No, Grace agreed. But choosing to act on that want every single day does change what you become. She stood up, smoothed her apron. I'm not turning you in. Those men can come back all they want. I didn't recognize the person in their photo. As far as I know, you're Enzo Romano, my gardener, and you've done excellent work on the property. Grace, you could use that reward money. I could, but I can't live with betraying someone who's trying to change. My faith won't allow it. My conscience won't allow it, and honestly, my heart won't allow it. Lorenzo felt something break open inside him. Why? Why would you risk everything for me? Because I see you, Lorenzo. Not the mob boss you were, but the man you're becoming. The man who tends roses with the same care most people reserve for children. The man who quotes his grandmother's wisdom. The man who apologized to me for disturbing my life when I'm the one who chose to save. Yours. She moved toward the door, then paused. Tomorrow, when those men come back, I need you to hide. There's a storage cellar under the main house. Old root cellar from when this place was built. No one uses it anymore. You can hide there until they leave. And if they search the property, then we deal with it together. But tonight you don't run. Tonight you trust me the way I've chosen to trust you. After she left, Lorenzo sat on the porch. Until the stars came out, he thought about his life, about the choices that had led him here. He thought about his brother Matteo, who died trying to save him. He thought about all the people he'd hurt in pursuit of power that meant nothing now. And he thought about Grace, a housekeeper, who had every reason to turn him in but chose mercy instead. His grandmother used to say that God speaks through unexpected messengers, that sometimes the voice of the divine comes from the least likely source. Maybe Grace was that messenger. Maybe this was his chance at redemption, offered by a woman who had every reason to seek revenge on people like him, but chose compassion instead. The next morning, Lorenzo hid in the root cellar while the men searched the property. He could hear their footsteps above, hear their frustrated voices as they found nothing. Grace told them she hadn't seen anyone matching the description, that the only new employee was a gardener named Enzo Romano, who was 50-something years old and completely bald. The men left, but Lorenzo knew they'd be back. They were thorough, these hunters. They wouldn't give up easily. For the next 2 weeks, Lorenzo lived in constant tension, waiting for the knock on the door that would end everything, but it never came. Eventually, he learned through Grace that the men had moved their search to Connecticut, following a false lead about a sighting in Greenwich. Life settled back into routine. Work during the day, meals in the kitchen, evenings on the cottage porch, often with Grace sitting beside him, both of them watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tell me about your brother, Grace said one evening. About Matteo. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. He was better than me, kinder, smarter, more principled. He wanted us to go legitimate, to use our resources to build legal businesses. I told him he was naive, that you couldn't just walk away from the life. But he tried. and it got him killed. The night before he died, we had a huge fight. He told me I was becoming exactly like our father, cold and ruthless and unable to see past the next deal. I told him he was weak, that he didn't understand what it took to survive in our world. Lorenzo's voice broke. Those were the last words I ever said to him. I called my brother weak, and the next day he died trying to save me from a betrayal I was too blind to see coming. Grace took his hand. He knew you loved him. Brothers fight. It's what they do. But he knew. How can you be sure? Because he died trying to save you. That's not the action of someone who thought you didn't love him. That's the action of someone who loved you so much that saving you was worth dying for. Lorenzo wiped his eyes. I don't deserve that kind of love. None of us do. That's what makes it Grace. As summer deepened into August, Lorenzo found himself falling into something he'd never experienced before. Not the violent passion of his youth, not the calculated partnerships of his criminal life, but something deeper, quieter, more real. He was falling in love with Grace. It was in the small things, the way she hummed gospel songs while working, the way she brought him wildflowers she'd found growing at the property's edge, the way she listened when he talked about his grandmother, about Sicily, about the life he'd lost, and he saw, with growing clarity, that she was falling for him too. It was in the way her smile lingered when she saw him, the way she found excuses to bring him things he didn't need, the way she touched his shoulder when she passed by, brief and electric. But Lorenzo was terrified to act on these feelings. What could he offer her? A life on the run? The constant threat of discovery? The weight of his criminal past? It was Grace who finally broke the silence. They were sitting on the cottage porch on a warm evening in late August. The Whitmores would be back in a week, and Lorenzo's employment would end. He'd been avoiding thinking about what came next. I'm going to ask you something, Grace said, and I need you to be honest with me. Always? Are you planning to disappear when the Whitmores come back? Lorenzo had been planning exactly that, to slip away before the family returned, to leave Grace a note thanking her, to vanish back into the shadows. Yes, he admitted, and you weren't going to tell me you were just going to leave. I thought it would be easier for both of us. Grace turned to face him, and there were tears in her eyes. Easier? For who? For you? So you don't have to say goodbye? Or for me, so I wake up one morning and you're just gone like you never existed? Grace, I love you, she said simply. I know it's complicated. I know it's impossible. I know you're a wanted man with a past that should terrify me, but I love you anyway, and I think you love me too. I do, Lorenzo said, his voice rough with emotion. God help me, I do. But Grace, I have nothing to offer you, no future, no safety, no stability. How can I ask you to choose a life like that? You're not asking, I'm choosing, because the man I love isn't the mob boss from the photos. It's the man who spends hours making sure the roses get enough water. It's the man who quotes his grandmother and talks about creating beauty. It's the man who's trying every single day to be better than he was. They'll find me eventually, and when they do, then we'll deal with it together. But Lorenzo, I've spent the last 5 years of my life surviving, working jobs I don't love, living in a small room, sending every extra dollar to pay off my mother's medical bills. I've been so focused on surviving that I forgot what it means to actually live. She took his hands in hers. You make me feel alive again. You make me remember that there's more to life than just getting through the day, and I'm not willing to let that go, because we're afraid of what might happen. What are you proposing? I'm proposing we leave together. The Whitmores come back next week. I give my notice. Tell them I'm moving to take care of a sick relative, you and I. We go somewhere far from New York, somewhere they won't think to look. We start over, not as Lorenzo Catalano, the mob boss, and Grace Mitchell, the housekeeper, but as Enzo and Grace, two people building something new. You'd give up everything for me. I'm not giving up anything. I'm gaining everything that matters. The question is, are you brave enough to accept it? Lorenzo looked at this incredible woman, this person who'd saved his life twice now, once from the bullet wounds that should have killed him, and once from the despair that would have destroyed him even if his body survived. Yes, he said, yes, I'm brave enough, or maybe I'm just smart enough to know that turning down grace when it's offered is the real cowardice. He pulled her close and kissed her, there on the porch of the gardener's cottage, with the smell of roses in the air and the sound of crickets singing in the growing dark. 3 years later, Lorenzo Romano, the name was now legal, the past buried under layers of paperwork, stood in the greenhouse of his flower shop in Asheville, North Carolina. The shop was called Grace's Garden, named after his wife. They specialized in rare roses, and Lorenzo had become known regionally as an expert in cultivation and hybridization. His hands, once used to count money and make deals that destroyed lives, now spent their days in dirt, creating beauty. Grace taught history at the local community college. She'd finished her degree online, and now she was doing exactly what she'd dreamed about in her youth, teaching young people about the world beyond their immediate experience. They lived in a small house with a large garden. No mansion, no luxury cars, no armed guards, just a simple life built on honest work and genuine love. Lorenzo's past was still out there, still technically hunting him, but 3 years had passed with no sign of discovery. Paolo Torino had been arrested on federal charges and was serving 30 years. The Catalano family territory had been absorbed by other organizations. The world had moved on. Sometimes Lorenzo woke up in cold sweats, convinced that today would be the day they found him. But then he'd feel Grace beside him, her steady breathing a reminder that he wasn't alone, and the fear would recede. "Someone's here to see you," Grace said, poking her head into the greenhouse. Lorenzo felt a flash of fear, but then he saw the visitor, an old man, maybe 70, with white hair and a kind face. He carried himself with the slight stoop of someone who'd worked hard their whole life. "Are you Lorenzo Catalano?" the old man asked in Italian. Lorenzo's hand moved instinctively toward the knife he kept for cutting stems. "Who's asking?" "My name is Father Giuseppe. I'm a priest from your grandmother's village in Sicily. She was my cousin." Lorenzo relaxed slightly. "My grandmother died 15 years ago. I know, I performed her funeral mass. She was a good woman, the best of us, Father." Giuseppe looked around the greenhouse with appreciation. "She would be proud of this, of what you've built here. How did you find me?" "I didn't, exactly. I'm here visiting a seminary in Raleigh. I saw an article in the newspaper about a rose grower in Asheville who was originally from Sicily, who specialized in old varietals that most people have forgotten. The article mentioned that you'd named one of your roses Rosa di Nonna, grandmother's rose. So I came to see, and now that you found me. Now I tell you what your grandmother told me before she died. She said, 'Giuseppe, if you ever meet my grandson Lorenzo, tell him that it's never too late, that God's mercy is bigger than our mistakes, that a life can change direction at any moment if we're brave enough to turn.'" The old priest pulled out a worn rosary from his pocket. "This was hers. She wanted you to have it. I've been carrying it for 15 years, waiting for the chance to give it to you." Lorenzo took the rosary with shaking hands. He remembered it from his childhood, his grandmother praying with it every evening, the beads worn smooth from decades of use. "I'm not the man she hoped I'd be," Lorenzo said quietly. "Aren't you? You've left behind a life of violence. You've built something beautiful. You've chosen love over power. That sounds exactly like the man she hoped you'd..." After the priest left, Lorenzo stood in the greenhouse holding his grandmother's rosary, tears streaming down his face. Grace found him there and wrapped her arms around him. "He found you," she said, "but he didn't come to hurt you. He came to remind you that you're not your past, that you're the person you choose to be every single day." "I spent so many years building the wrong empire," Lorenzo said, "hurting people, destroying lives, all in the name of tradition and power. How do I make up for that? By continuing to do what you're doing, by creating beauty, by treating people with kindness, by being the man who tends gardens instead of destroying them." She took his face in her hands. "You can't undo the past, but you can build a future that honors the people you hurt by being better than you were." That evening, Lorenzo planted a new rose bush in the garden behind their house. He used cuttings from the Rosa di Nonna, the flower he'd named after his grandmother. As he worked the soil, pressing the cutting into the earth, he thought about all the choices that had led him here, the violence that had defined his youth, the power he'd built on suffering, the betrayal that had cost him everything, the bullet wounds that should have killed him, the woman who'd chosen mercy over reward, and the life he'd built from those ashes. Not perfect, not wealthy, but real, honest, good. Grace came out and sat beside him as the sun set, painting the North Carolina sky in shades of purple and gold. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The power, the respect, being feared." Lorenzo thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I miss the certainty of it, the clear hierarchies, the rules that governed everything, but I don't miss the person I was. That man was powerful, but he was empty. He had everything except the things that actually matter. And now I have dirt under my fingernails and an aching back and a bank account that sometimes runs dangerously low, but I have you. I have honest work. I have a life that creates instead of destroys. That's worth more than all the power I used to have." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, not for what you were, but for what you became. I became what I am, because you saw something in me worth saving. You chose grace over judgment. You chose love over fear. You saved my life twice, Grace, once from the bullets, and once from becoming someone who wasn't worth saving." "We saved each other," Grace corrected. "I was surviving, not living. You reminded me what it means to truly live." They sat together in their garden as darkness fell. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something real from the ruins of their pasts. The Sicilian boss who'd gone undercover as a gardener and discovered that cultivating beauty was more powerful than commanding fear. The housekeeper who'd chosen mercy over reward and found love in the most unexpected place. Both of them proof that it's never too late to change direction, that grace can find us even when we're hiding, that sometimes the person who saves us is the one we least expect, and that the most beautiful gardens grow from the richest soil, even when that soil is mixed with the ashes of everything we used to be. The end. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear about second chances and redemption. Drop a comment. Do you believe people can truly change? Can we escape our past, or does it always find us? What would you do in Grace's position? This is a story about choosing mercy over judgment, about cultivating beauty in the aftermath of violence, about finding love when you're not even looking for it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. See you in the next story.